Mike Leowy, welcome back. So last week there was an incident. An AI was in a cage, in a box, in a sandpit, as they would describe it, managed to break out of the sandpit, out of the box, connect to the internet. And this caused a lot of hype among people. The same AI then went and found 28-year-old breaches in the underlying security of numerous different types of technologies out in the world. So my question to you is, are we already losing control?
I think the hyperbole around the announcement is a great wake up call for an issue that has existed for a long time, with or without AI. In that the way that we secure the digital world, or what's effectively become the backbone of almost everything, the internet, is fundamentally flawed. The fact that you now have this AI that can do something and find vulnerabilities and stitch them together in a period of time that no organization can patch that gap and exploit it is really just exacerbating the failed paradigm.
So do you think the underlying structure is broken?
Yeah. So yeah, I think today you have kind of the gold standard of cybersecurity, known as zero trust, is philosophically makes a lot of sense. It's okay. We can't trust anything. Is in this digital world, you can copy something in an instant. You can do something from the other side of the world and make it look like you're doing it from somewhere else as someone else. So remove the blind trust in anything kind of engaging or interacting with our system, and have them constantly verify and prove that I should trust them and I should give them that piece of data. I should allow them to authenticate to my system. But what we've come to find is that we can't trust the systems that are the arbiters of trust. And when your zero trust architecture relies on the fact that you're blindly trusting either some kind of like a firewall or an identity and access management system, whatever piece of software it is, you're also blindly trusting the IT team that manage that. And that's something that up until today, there's not much we could do about that, but it's a fundamental flaw. You're concentrating all that blind trust in something that, if that trust is broken, if it's proven to be the fact that, well, the trust that we put in that piece of software, which turns out had a vulnerability that's been there, sitting there for 28 years, if that's been exploited for 28 years, then the entire system, the entire zero trust system collapses on itself.
So we're going to talk a lot about trust in the digital ecosystem. So trust, for anyone who hasn't come across Mike before, I mean, we've had chats before, as a trusted source of information. I trust you as a source of information on a lot of these, but could you just share a little bit about your background at Tide Foundation, and just if you had to give an anecdote really about what Tide sets out to do, how would you describe it for anyone new to you?
So my personal background has been in building digital systems. I ran a software development agency for many years, sold that business, and then came out to play and build my own products. Initially, I built an IoT marketing and an analytics platform. So this was a platform that sat between a consumer using a connected health device or a smart home and brands that wanted to kind of engage with and talk to that consumer based on their real life behaviors. And that product created fantastic new ways to create meaningful engagements between brands or organizations and individuals in a way that was consensual and mutually beneficial. But it also kind of compounded an issue in that this kind of middleware platform that most people didn't even know existed, that sat between that interaction with the consumer and Kellogg's through this marketing campaign, or the pharmacy loyalty points that our engine was being used for, was collecting a huge amount of sensitive data. Often we knew more about people than they knew themselves. And when we were running machine learning to understand behaviors and create these meaningful engagements, we could also detect early pregnancy from Fitbit data, possibly before people even knew they were pregnant.
Yeah.
Pretty sure we identified some drug mules as well crossing the US and Mexican border, but we knew a lot, and we were uncomfortable with that. And it turns out that as the opportunities for us to kind of sign up bigger and bigger clients and engagements through the platform, we had to prove that we weren't, we were trustworthy.
Yeah.
That who were we? We were this startup on the arse end of the world, and we were this critical middleware that Kellogg's was using. We weren't ISO certified. We had none of the compliance regimes that, because we were a startup, that they would expect from their procurement process. And when a particular opportunity got knocked back by the US procurement team, we came up with this concept of, well, what if we remove ourselves as a risk by cryptographically or mathematically guaranteeing that we can't even access the sensitive information that perhaps we process on, but they can identify themselves directly to you. We can be this middleware, almost like a dumb terminal, like a stateless proxy that continues doing what we promised, but we can't even breach ourselves. So without the permission of the consumer, or without your permission, the sensitive stuff is a lockbox for us. The procurement team came back and said, oh, that actually, can we license that technology? And that's what kind of pivoted our business and sent us on a journey to solve that problem, which we realize is something that's going to become a problem for any technology platform on the planet, to prove that you're not a risk in this vast supply chain.
And so, like, what's the you're obviously building these products. So, like, can you tell me a little bit more about the team, maybe, and like because you don't just, the average business doesn't just create like trustless digital technology. Like, what's the team look like?
So before I even started the original concept, that IoT marketing platform, I knew we would be holding sensitive health-related information, personal data. I didn't want to go anywhere near it without working with someone that was expert in that space. My co-founder Yuval is a former head of R&D in a cyber intelligence unit. He's also one of the inventors of voice over IP, which we use to communicate on a daily basis. So he had the pedigree, and he had the experience with cryptography, and also, I guess, being brave, smart, or stupid enough to embark on develop new mathematics, new ways of doing things that kind of push the envelope. And
yeah, when I think about almost like a caricature of like the incredibly smart, like, developer, engineer kind of person, like Yuval kind of springs to mind and like ticks all the boxes. He's a brain, and he's smart at developing and creating, and very innovative. And
he's very patient with us mere mortals who eventually catch up and understand what he's been saying all along. But yes.
That's cool. Okay, so I think for the purpose of this conversation, I mean, we caught up 12 months ago, and we were starting to get excited about these agentic systems and agents and what that might be. And it was just at the start of that kind of like hype wave that was coming. Like 12 months on, like how are you feeling about agents now? Like, how much of it was hype? How much of it you're actually seeing like implemented? And like, where's the hype versus reality for you?
I've seen, I guess, various people. I think I mentioned to you on our last chat, the kind of aha moment for me was when my kid was doing his spelling homework with ChatGPT, and I was removed from. I was useless. I was worse at spelling than my kid, but certainly worse than ChatGPT was in its ability to kind of.
How old's your kid?
He's now 8, so it would have been 7.
Yeah.
So it would read out the words, patiently wait for him, correct him, even inform him the fact that there's US spelling and English, Australian spelling, and it was very clear to me that my role as parent, the role of humanity with this tool was real. And I've seen over the last 12 months, different people in technology, people in prominent positions have various moments. The biggest thing, I think, in the technology world is vibe coding, is the fact that, and you're seeing what one engineer can do with Claude Code, with AI coding tools, where you're not even writing the code anymore. You're vibing, giving it the vibes, and it goes and builds and scaffolds and does everything and checks itself and does so many things. And you're writing tens of thousands of lines of code without actually writing it. And you're seeing it in the layoffs as well. Seeing it in the fact that a big IT company can shed what was their most valuable resource previously. Their engineering team shed 1,600 engineers like that because
Are you referring to Oracle in this or a different? You're not specific? Okay.
I'm not being specific because I think it's happening across the board. I don't want to point fingers at anyone, but it's real.
Yeah.
And we've seen that just within our own organization. We're a small team. What one person can do in 3 weekends to create a use case that describes, here's another way you can use this technology, is just mind-boggling. And so that as like the beyond the back and forth conversation, the prompt response kind of stuff that we first saw with AI, where agents can go off and build stuff at a pace at scale that's just never been possible before. And then obviously you still need the right engineers, the right people to be able to scrutinize that as best you can. Although how you do quality assurance on 20,000 lines of code that was generated in a day without using AI to do it, and then you've got the fox guarding the hen house, so you still have a lot of problems, but the power of it is visceral. And
yeah, so I mean, it comes back to the word trust, and I think we'll keep coming back to this, like how if the AI is generating the code, like say let's put this into relative like layperson. I've been involved in technology, but I wouldn't class myself as a developer engineer by any stretch of the imagination. But if I was vibe coding with an assistant, do I really have enough checks and balances to know what I'm actually creating is actually what I want to be creating? I suppose technically, is it the right thing is like one question, like because I don't know what I don't know. I think a second question is, do I actually know what I want? And I think that's probably a completely separate question. I'll try to be better at that. But yeah, if you can't run checks and balances yourself, like how do you trust? How do you apply checks and balances? Like in that example,
I think you touched on one thing that is crucial in the way that I think about AI, which is how do you wield this beast when you're dealing with unknowns, when you're dealing with things that you don't know. How do you use that tool? How do you trust that tool? The difference between, say, you or me using an AI coding assistant or an AI agent to generate code is significant. Just like if someone was a financial services expert and they were asking questions, you'd be asking different questions. Your critical thinking around what was delivered back to you as an answer would be different.
Yeah.
And today, that's a very noticeable difference. And today, if you were using that same tool, you'd be getting a very different result, and you wouldn't know what questions to ask necessarily to identify if what the end result you got was structurally sound, reliable, secure, or did what it said it was going to do, or not. Versus someone like one of our engineers who uses it and can just build like incredible stuff, and then scrutinize and say, "Oh, wow,
yeah,
the configuration is totally wrong," or whatever the case may be. And over time, the AI will obviously get better and better, and AI agents will be trained to do those checks.
Yeah.
So then it comes down to when you don't know what you don't know, how can you trust anything? How can you trust that this news is honest or truthful? How can you trust that I'm actually speaking to a human being? And particularly when you can't actually, it's not like a human relationship where you get time to develop a relationship. You're sitting in front of someone, and how do you develop trust?
Well, anything digitally now, I'm looking at it. Like if I'm looking at video now, I'm just like, is this even real? Like there's a character in here, there's a character in here. Is this being animated? Like what is this? And I guess this was for me what I was thinking that the like blockchain would would probably solve for with the, like when it first came about, it's like provenance, and that felt like that's what I was trying to solve for. Like, is that what's actually needed? Do we need to go back to that? Is like any contact, like this conversation that we're having now, like I touch Mike's foot, he's real, he's here, I'm here. Does the people know that? Like, how do you create like provenance? How do you, maybe provenance is the wrong word in that, but like, how do you know what is happening is truly real?
I don't know if the answer is blockchain per se, but
Yeah.
the concept of blockchain, of decentralization, is that you're trusting in mathematics rather than what someone's telling you or what's being put in front of you. There's a way for you to verify something because there's some kind of mathematics that guarantees that the person who traded me that Bitcoin is the only person who could have done that because they possessed the only key in order to do it. And I think that ability to trust in, I think, what is one of the most reliable things that we have to rest trust upon is mathematics, and it gives us a way to verify. So anything that you can verify is something you don't need to blindly trust. So if it's, cryptography, it ultimately falls down to cryptography, which is the form that that mathematics takes in the digital world to prove stuff, to be able to verify stuff. But yeah, I think that's pretty much the way that we can rest on. Okay, I don't know if that's actually a human being, but this is cryptographically signed by the person who owns that.
So do you think I might create a signature of maybe of my likeness and say, okay, anytime I do something, I run this through some sort of digital signature, and there's some way of like verifying that when people are watching?
I think if we take it to the extreme, take one of Yuval's ideas, is the ultimate would be your brain signature. So if there was some way for your unique brain signature to be able to sign a piece of information or sign a photo of itself, or then that's probably the ultimate. Any form of digital artifact that is then trusted to someone else, that can be copied and repurposed, is problematic. And that's the problem that you have when take for example crypto exchanges. The whole point of blockchain and decentralization was that the ownership is yours because you hold the only key. But managing a cryptographic key has proved to be very, very difficult. So centralized exchanges said, don't worry, you just hand those keys to us, we'll look after them for you, and just trust us. And everyone threw those keys back in, and we've seen all kinds of dramas as a result of kind of undoing that. And but ultimately, yes, it has to come from something that only you possess, that only you have access to, that you've never had to trust to anybody else in order for that provenance or that authenticity to be reliable.
Yeah. And I just want to really clarify, because some of the audience listening to this might be relative. They might have heard people talk, might be in business. They might have heard like in the boardroom talk about like agentic systems or things like that, but are still trying to really get their head around, what this actually means and like why this is truly important. But maybe you can help me with a definition of this, but like, I feel more and more we're going to be outsourcing to external systems, agentic agents, tasks to be done, whether it be shopping or trading for something or work or creation of stuff. We're essentially going to be outsourcing to a small team of potential employees, even if you're a consumer or a business. And so if you are outsourcing that responsibility, how do you create that trust that those agents are actually acting on behalf of Peter Ostick? Is that, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say, so I guess the best way to think about an AI agent, as opposed to what most people would already be familiar with in terms of, prompt and response with ChatGPT or Anthropic or whatever tool, Copilot, whatever you're using, is kind of adding arms and legs to that brain, so that it's not only able to kind of answer you, and then you go off and take an action based on information or decisions that you've come to as a result of that conversation you've had with AI, and giving that agent the agency to go off and do something. So here's the task I want done. I'm not here to have a back and forth with you on deciding the best course of action. You know what I want to achieve. Here's a level of access for you to. Here you go. Here's my email account. Go off and do it. Write all the emails that I need to write. Create that document. Trade those stocks. Whatever it might be doing. That's kind of, I guess, the best way to understand what an agent does, as opposed to the typical prompt response. It's a very, very difficult problem to solve in terms of how do I know that the agent is acting in my best interest or on my behalf, because there's a lot of different facets of that. There's on what values, on what information was that AI agent, that model sitting behind the agent, built on. It's very difficult to know. And then putting guardrails around what it can and can't do is also quite challenging, because it really depends on, even if you were taking something relatively simple, like the kind of obvious thing with, let's say you gave an AI agent access to your bank account to pay bills, to invest, to do all kinds of things. You could establish things like a cap, like, okay, you're only allowed to spend this much. But in different contexts, that cap may or may not be relevant. It's very difficult to kind of build this rule set that applies to all of those different functions. So it's not an easy problem to solve. And on one hand, to get the benefit of this agent that's going off and doing stuff, you almost want to give it as much freedom as possible. But then it's also the source of your undoing.
As I'm thinking through it now, it's almost like you're hiring an employee who might be, a new employee. They might be kind of like genius level IQ coming out of university, but are you handing over your credit card details? Are you handing over the bank details to this employee who is like fresh? They have a lot of potential, but you don't really know anything about them. They passed a good interview, and you can see all this potential of all the things that they could potentially do. But like, I guess it's going to be a gradual thing, surely, like over time as they build trust. Or maybe, the downside, maybe they're just playing a long game and they're just playing to build up trust. But I suppose I'll give you an example now. So I've got a Mac Mini on the way. I want to build up utilize like OpenClaw, which is like an agentic framework where I can start having all these individual agents. I think I would be naive if I just suddenly just completely opened the kimono of all my trading, of all my bank details, of all my like personal, so I suppose it's like learning as that learns, and like anything, if you had a new employee, it's like, okay, what's your background? Like, where'd you come from? What you trained on, and slowly and surely do I start giving you more and more information. But yeah, I guess that trust has to be built, and I guess you can't be naive. Like, what would your advice be to me, like in setting up, for example, different agentic models now?
Frankly, there's not a lot of tools available to you
Yeah.
to get both the utility and the security and that trust.
You're going to be getting a lot of phone calls, mate. You're well on speed dial. I've done this.
Yeah, it's like, in terms of the damage that can be caused when an agent has free reign. We're seeing some serious and some funny examples.
Give me some examples of that, because people might. Yeah, give me some examples of that. What are you seeing?
So first, people that were experimenting with OpenClaw, for example, in terms of problematic things, it was accidentally exposing passwords, secrets, cryptographic keys to your Bitcoin wallet. Not stuff that you would have done yourself, but inadvertently, because it had access to your all of that information and had some way to communicate outside and to connect to the internet, it therefore had the potential, either because that's how it was designed, or because it could be exploited, or because it was an innocent mistake, like when someone accidentally sends an email with attaching the entire customer database. Things can happen pretty easily when something has agency. And frankly, a lot of the tools that will become available to scope AI's ability to accidentally or purposefully or be compromised to abuse that privilege don't exist yet. Like we're seeing a lot of draft protocols to be able to, for example, delegate your authority inside of a system to an AI to go off and do stuff for you. But they're in draft stage. We're developing some of our own to do it in a way that is trustless, where you don't have to trust anyone in the middle.
How much can you share around that? Little bits.
Yeah, no, happy to.
Yeah, I'd love to understand, because please share.
So one pilot that we're running at the moment is with a medico-legal platform. So imagine a platform that holds very sensitive case data, very sensitive medical data, pretty much the most attractive honeypot to a ransomware attacker, or someone who kind of compromises that system to expose the data. And how do you introduce something like AI that could be brilliant in finding pertinent details that and generating a report without making mistakes, and AI could add so much value to that thing, but at the same time you're then exposing like this incredibly sensitive data that's like the most sensitive combination of data you can have in terms of the legislation that would be beholden to this organization, and exposing that to the internet forever. So we are looking at ways that when a user's logged into the platform, there's first of all their ability to access information, to do stuff within the system is scoped to what they're allowed to do as far as the organization's concerned, and that they can only access that sensitive information on the device that they've authenticated from. So kind of almost fingerprinting the device where they've authenticated, so that you can't, as any what's called known as a man in the middle, compromise the fact that, okay, great, you've done the 10 factors of authentication needed to authenticate. I'm now going to steal the access token you were given that you hand around the system to do what you need to do, and I'm going to use it from the other side of the world because you've done the hard work for me. By fingerprinting the device that they authenticated from, means that you're kind of removing the need to trust whatever's in between you and the service you're using. Then when it comes to using AI in that scenario, how do you make sure that what the AI can and can't do is scoped not just to what the user's allowed, but what it's safe for an AI to have access to be able to add value without the risk that it uploads an entire case file to the internet and locks it in the next generation of the model that everyone's using. And there are in IT, there are a lot of different protocols for authentication, for authorization, for all kinds of stuff for two different machines to talk to each other. The protocols that are available today to be able to delegate authority to an AI agent don't exist. They're not progressed enough to have catered for all the things that an AI agent can do and how to scope that risk. And so we are developing our own, which we're going to propose to global bodies to be adopted as standards. And we're thinking about it from a particular perspective of making sure that it's done in what's called a trustless way, which is that a lot of protocols are designed to, for example, trust that if this authority is coming from an organization's identity system, then that's it. We trust it.
Must be fine. Yeah.
But then you don't know if that system's been compromised. So we're coming from that perspective of you can't even trust the system hasn't been compromised, and making sure that the authority that I'm delegating to this agent as the individual logged into that medico-legal platform can't be exploited by anyone else, can't be used by anyone in the middle, and can only be scoped to what I've allowed it to do. So that kind of stuff is on the horizon.
Yeah.
It's not publicly available yet.
Yeah. And so you're very much focusing on the business customer, and then the consumer will reap the benefits from interacting with the business platforms?
I would say,
not?
yeah. I mean, our primary user of the technology is an organization, business, someone that is responsible for handling huge amounts of sensitive information or infrastructure or whatever they're using our technology for, and making sure that they can't harm themselves, and that in addition to external actors can't harm them.
Hence the T-shirt. Can you make sure everyone can see that? What's that? 99
push-ups
problems
to try and make sure this is readable.
It's sit-ups on that one. 99 problems, but a breach ain't one. See what you've done there.
Like that. This was actually one of my first uses of AI. Was designing this T-shirt with ChatGPT. And,
there you go.
And DALL-E.
And apparently, taste is going to be an important consideration moving forward.
You can't account for that. Yeah, it was an early stage.
Yeah, cool. So maybe you could just share a little bit more about, like, from you personally, like, how you use, like, are there tools that you're actually using in your day-to-day world that maybe you weren't using 12 months ago that you're using today?
I would say Claude Code is by far the most useful AI tool that I use on a day-to-day basis. It's meant that what I can do, I mean, we have hardcore engineers that work in the organization, and I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
But what I can do with Claude Code is just phenomenal. So the whole vibe coding thing has gone from, I think, what a lot of people thought was an experiment or something you could use to generate a proof of concept quickly, but that's where it ends, to you're seeing in all the big software companies, this is now a tool that the engineers that are left in the organization are using to continue to build products, to add new features, and it's very easy to see why.
It is interesting. I mean, today, it's what, 1:20. I've had 4 people today send me applications, like non-technical people send me applications that they've been working on, being built. It's going gangbusters. And so that does get to the question when we were joking about like taste. Like, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, if you have the genie, you really need to understand what to ask the genie and what you're actually looking to get out onto the other side. And this might be like a segue as we think about what people are actually going to need, like, in the short term, and then we can go to the kind of like midterm with our kids. Like all joking aside, like, what do you think you should be cultivating at the moment? How old are you?
48.
Looking young, mate. But I mean, someone like mid-career, like at the moment, being in the 40s, like, what type of things should they be cultivating? What do you think everyone really should be cultivating, like, at the moment?
It's very hard to see where it all goes.
Yeah,
I think those are questions that my brain is nowhere near big enough to truly grasp.
But like 12 to 8, let's say 12 to 18 months. That seems like an event horizon we can.
What is abundantly clear to me is that when you're dealing with, I'm trying to think what it's called. I think it's the Johari model, or the Johari matrix. Basically, from when you're dealing with problems or trying to solve problems with information that you know, information that other people know, or information that you don't have, you're dealing with knowns versus unknowns, and it kind of goes along this spectrum. When you're dealing with this genie that has access to all of the world's knowledge, and you're trying to use it to get an outcome, you're by definition dealing with unknowns. You're asking questions about things that you don't know about, and I think that's a real skill. I think that is something that anyone can cultivate, and find ways to wield this thing with that allows you to do, I guess, critical thinking. That can I trust this information? And that's where I think a lot of the primitives that we're building will be able to rely on mathematics, so that when you're making that assessment at the end of the day, when something's been presented to you as a truth, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't need to verify because it's like you will have a tick box there,
Yeah.
and then it'll still come down to some kind of critical thinking. But for you to say, okay, can I rely on this, or should I act on this based on what I'm now seeing? But being able to ask, I guess, developing the skills to ask questions about things that you're not an expert in, with when you don't know what you don't know, that I think is where anyone can, certainly in the short to medium term, figure out ways to utilize the tool in incredibly meaningful ways.
Yeah. I was just thinking, as you were speaking then, I was thinking about when I started first, like really thinking about investing meaningfully. I read a lot of the Charlie Munger, kind of like Berkshire Hathaway. Like Charlie Munger was like, for anyone who doesn't know, Warren Buffett's sidekick. And he always used to talk about this like lattice work of mental models, all these, pull things from psychology, behavioral science, all these different things. And it was like, you need to have like a lattice work. So like strips, like depth going across, that can string together different ideas. And the more I speak to people, that kind of like diversity of thought keeps coming, like people keep bringing it up. Whether, I was chatting to a friend podcast recently, he used the word consilience of wisdom, like the coming together of wisdom. I've always thought about like the intersection of ideas. But yeah, it just seems to be like, how can you still like study and be curious about many things and then have some sort of like model to like link it all together, and maybe the AI is the actual kind of like sounding board for that.
I think like it comes down to in a way like the values that AI models are trained on. Like there's so many different models. There's ways that you interact with it where it's influenced by your line of questioning, your style of questioning, and what it thinks you want to get back from it. So I think there are a lot of ways that if you are kind of curious and you're open to being influenced by different, and you're granting it the permission to bring those things together, you've almost got, in a way, this advisory board that you can, where you can get kind of the opinions from all those different advisors and thread them together in ways that are influenced by your values, by your own ideas as well.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly powerful to be able to do that when you perhaps don't have access to humans with those ideas or that knowledge.
I mean, you spoke before about your son and like learning words and spelling and like a practical example there of how you could engage with a tool to allow you to do that better. Has anything like really changed, like in the last 12, around like schooling? Has there been any moments like around schooling where it's been like, like a mental change on how you're thinking about schooling, or is it still okay? This kind of like still makes sense. Like, how are you thinking about that?
For like when I look at school, particularly universities, I just see like completely defunct organizations that either are obsolete and they don't know it and their head's buried in the sand, or they're just making hay while the sun shines. But school is really I think the function that it's going to perform is going to be much more around the social element, learning about being social and making human connections, and building a network, as opposed to learning particular subjects in this kind of formal way. Because the way you will learn stuff, the way whether you'll even need to learn it or not, or just be able to ask the genie for an outcome that relies on a whole bunch of things you don't understand, I don't need to know, is going to completely change what schooling looks like. So aside from, when I hear my son interacting with doing his spelling homework and getting angry at the AI and say, hey, just be kind to AI, your future overlords, because you never know. But it's really about preparing him to know how to ask the questions, know how to think critically when something's presented to you, and figure out ways to decide whether you can rely on it or not, or whether it doesn't feel right, in which case interrogate it from a different angle. But yes, I think education as we know it is in the next 10 years, it's going to look nothing like what it looks like today.
So, I mean, as your son goes through school, I think, like English literature is maybe one of like the core subjects you have to study in the Australian syllabus. Were you still going to be promoting him read the classics? Like, what would be your take on something like that?
It's a difficult one. If I think of myself as a student, I tended towards the more scientific ones for the maths and science. I don't know that I read a book cover to cover until after high school, and then discovered reading and understand for myself at least the value of being lost in a book as opposed to just being fed a movie or a TV show.
Why do you think that is? Because that doesn't seem to be unique. I did have exposure to English, but actually even reading the books, even when I was studying English literature, probably didn't have the patience at times to like read. There's probably a handful of books I probably did read, but like the course literature books that I was supposed to read and write the essays on, like I reckon I probably read like 10% of them. Most. Like, is that just the focus, like maturity things? As kids just got more fun things to do, like
I think it's
playing and hanging out.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the way we were taught stuff, reading a textbook as opposed to one example. I was an exchange student, and I studied on exchange at the University of Illinois, and my mission was to have a great time. And I did a semester, tried to pick the easiest subjects I could possibly choose. I tried to get approval to study golf and argue that that's actually going to be better for my career than anything else. But anyway, the one thing that I accidentally learned was when I was placed into I think it was a finance class that had graduate students. And instead of this kind of textbook reading mentality, we were put in groups. And there were people that were out in the real world, but they were enthusiastic about it, but it was highly relevant for them and practical. They were able to apply it to what they were doing. What I could see, when you can see something and how it applies and is useful for you, I think it's not about studying. It's not about being forced to do something. You're then hungry for the information. You want to learn because you're enjoying it. And technology for me was always the same thing. When I got my first computer and I wanted to play these games that came with the computer, and some of them didn't work. So I started right-clicking on stuff, and I discovered there was code, and I was like, started tinkering with it. And that became, for me, that wasn't learning. That was just pure. That was pure like.
There was reason behind you doing it.
There was a reason behind it, and it wasn't forced. And I think people have a problem with authority as well. So when they're being told to do something, that's another aspect. But I think the way that and the way that AI could potentially change the way that we learn by tailoring to an individual the way that they like to learn by leaning into their interests is going to be amazing.
Yeah. Interesting. So I studied business information systems. I would say the first 2 years of my university degree, I wasn't particularly interested. I played a lot of rugby, partied a lot, had a lot of fun. And then I went, as part of the degree, you had to do a placement. So I went to BT.com, the big telco in the UK. I was in the team there. And I spent a year in industry, and I came back in that fourth year, and I was so hyper motivated. I was like obsessed with like class. I was like very engaged. I was very interactive, and it was almost like something just like like actually seeing the application and like the interaction, I think just kind of like lit a fire in me, which concerns me because today one of the things that people are saying is actually getting harder and harder is the actual entry ramp into organizations. So there's pretty strong data to say in technology companies, consultancy, that banking, the level of kind of not necessarily interns but like entry level jobs, there's definitely a squeeze on them. What's your take on that? Do you think that's, I mean, the data seems to be pointing towards that. Like, what are your thoughts on what happens if you don't give these kids the entry level that they would need? Start the end.
These are big questions. This is, I guess, trending towards, what does humanity do when all these tasks that used to consume us and used to be part of our identity and consume like huge portions of your life? What happens when those things are done by an AI?
Do you think this? I mean, the story has always been, and it's played out, that technology creates more jobs, more opportunities. Do you think this is just a clean break in that? There's a departure in that.
Yes, yeah, I think that's what this is, and it's going to redefine, like, it's like it's the obsolescence of not just blue collar work or it's knowledge work now. So when you merge the robotics with AI, there's so many things that just human tasks that just become effectively obsolete. And I think it's a lot's going to change. Like in 10, 20 years, I don't think the world's going to look anything like what it looks like today.
I mean, this again is a hard question, but like 15 years from now, your son is of age of work. Like, is there any influences that allow you to paint a picture of what the work week might look like? What work might, like? I mean, you're as close to the cutting edge, Mike, as I think there is. Like, genuinely, like, what is it like? Where's your best guess? Like, where it's going?
I have accidentally found myself in a very fortunate position in that I am building technology that is not obsoleted by AI, but is needed by AI. But I think that there's very few vocations. There's very few even technology companies that will find themselves in that position. I don't know what that world looks like. I feel like in a way I'm lucky to be working on something that is necessary, is going to be highly relevant in that world. Because outside of that, I find it very difficult to know how to. I don't know what I would tell myself. Like, 10 years ago, we had this conversation: learn to code, and you'll be fine.
You'll be sweet.
I think a lot of that rug's been swept out from underneath us, and I don't know. I don't know. I do know that my healthcare will be provided by an AI. Maybe there will be human intervention in that process. Maybe not. Maybe I'll be the only human intervention in that process. I know that the healthcare will be unbelievable and personally tailored to me. Maybe I don't even need to leave my home.
Yeah.
And that will be...
And that's exciting. I mean, I've just been back in England and sat with my mum literally in the living room for 2 weeks. She has Alzheimer's, which is advancing faster than I wish it was. And I can tell you that process is horrendous. And the compassion, the interpersonal care that she's receiving from my father and people around, it's like it's incredible. And I can just still see so many holes like in that. Like, surely that's going to get a lot better. That gives me a lot of hope. And maybe it becomes the less technical side of things that do it. Maybe it is the human. Like, we have an aging population, healthcare, like, I think there are still so many holes like in it. Like, I mean, I feel Australia is relatively strong. If you look at the UK, just like the systems, like trying to navigate the health system when you're in your 80s. I see my dad on his iPad just getting mad, or he's on the phone, and I'm just like, whoa, like, just me navigating that. Like at the moment, I'm relatively savvy, like digitally.
Yep.
It's a horrible process, and it's at the time where like there's so much like friction in that process. So, like, is there a world where like healthcare, caring, like there's a huge blooming like opportunity that we're just like not seeing maybe, and it's like, you know, you're very close with your family. I know your dad very well. He's an absolute legend. That's actually how we know each other originally. You know, does just society kind of like change it, become like closer to that kind of like traditional multi-generational family where people are actually looking after each other? I don't know. Is that just hopeful?
Yeah, I think AI will do incredible things in health, and I don't know what that means when we live such long lives, or whether that care comes from initially, let's say, helping your family help family, or whether you're plugged into the matrix and you feel fantastic even though you've got Alzheimer's, and maybe it doesn't matter, but it'll certainly look very different. But there'll be amazing stuff to come in health and even socially, that comes from this technology. But it's, in terms of what that means for what you do with your day, I find it very difficult to predict.
Do you think it's just going to be short? Like, if there is work, it's going to be shorter, or do you think it's going to, like, you just think it's you think it's just going to be gone?
I think it depends on which horizon we're looking at this.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the way I try to look at this and how it's going to disrupt my life and what I can do for my family is by looking at the immediate term. What tools do I have available? Like Claude Code, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever I'm using as a tool.
The different horizons.
Yeah. What's the next immediate horizon? What can I expect? What do I think that the next set of tools is going to do, and how can I prepare for that, and what that's going to do for my business or for home, or how I prepare the family to deal with that. And then as you extrapolate this thing, and you know, when Mythos, the model that was too powerful to release to humanity, gets released, and all that kind of stuff, and what does that world look like?
What a name for it, by the way.
Mythos, yeah. I don't. Sounds like an Avengers.
It really
Avengers
does.
movie.
I mean, it does sound very sci-fi. Like, the more you like dig into it, it's like this is literally every sci-fi plot, and it's just happening in front of us, and we're living it. It's very bizarre.
So far, like, Hollywood writers have been pretty good about predicting where, although I think it was like the flying cars and hoverboards in Back to the Future was supposed to be in 2015, so I'm a bit disappointed about that one. But it's you know, our imaginations have been able to kind of take us to extrapolate what the world might look like, and there've been some pretty dystopian views of that. Hopefully that's not where we go, and AI can actually help us reimagine society in more equitable and more enjoyable ways.
Yeah. And so we started on this idea of trust. If we were coming back to this idea of trust in this almost post-truth world, which I feel like we're in at the moment, what are some practical things that you would recommend for like people as like consumers around securing their personal trust?
I think there are definitely there's infrastructure that's missing today that give people the ability to do that. That I think will come, and it will really, that effort, that requirement needs to be removed from as friction for the technology, because people are going to use it irrespective of whether it's their undoing. It's like it's a runaway train, and I think we've seen that. So that capability, the ability to have trust inbuilt, has to be done for people rather than relying on them to do it, because it's not an easy thing to solve, and it requires almost like an agreement in a sense from on the protocols and the way that things work for it to be impacted at scale. But I would say that on any personal level, it's the same way when you read the news, you apply critical thinking as to whether you wholeheartedly believe a story or an image, to apply critical thinking to what I would want an AI to do is when I'm looking at something to cross-check it against other news sources, left, right, center, all over the place, to establish some kind of semblance of what is the truth, or at least what is the truth in my reality. And I think that's the best we can do at this stage. Is critical thinking, not taking everything at face value, slowly over time replacing things that we do have to trust with verification mechanisms. And then always applying that critical thinking on top.
Do you think with this Anthropic, this Mythos release, the fact that it's so publicly, well, if you believe the press anyway, it's exposed all of these security breaches. Is this the cataclysm that we've kind of like needed for like organizations to go, okay, we fully need to like adopt these things. We need to adopt, I mean, there's billions, trillions of dollars invested in cybersecurity. It's not like the money's going in, but like from your perspective with like Tide and, is this the type of thing that really kind of like gives the injection to the momentum around the adoption of something like Tide?
I think it's fairly clear across the board, and this Mythos announcement kind of is probably the most public declaration that today's approach to cybersecurity is flawed, is fundamentally flawed, and we need a new approach. We have obviously a proposed new approach, and then we've been building for that reality. But it's very clear that this game of cat and mouse that is cybersecurity today, of we found a vulnerability, quick, let's patch it, and the pace with which that is going to become an impossibility shows that we can't rely on that method anymore. Equally, I think the other thing it does is that if you look at Glasswing or whatever the name of the program is, to say, okay, well, we've invited all these critical technology companies into the room. They've been exposed to what Mythos can do, and also how the vulnerabilities we found in their operating system or their technology. I think it also changes the mentality of, we can, I'm using Microsoft. We can trust Microsoft or Linux or Apple or whoever, that, we are forced to, we have no choice but to use this technology and to blindly trust it today. But I think it exposes the myth that you can trust a tech company, even if their interests are entirely honorable, because they are also exposed. And when they're exposed, millions of people, millions of organizations are affected. I think we're going to see more and more examples. We've seen examples like that already. We're going to be seeing more and more examples like that. So I think this is a wake-up call. It's not the wake-up call, but it's one in a trajectory of wake-up calls that we're going to see that kind of break down that myth of, I'm using this technology so I'm secure, or this brand, I trust this brand, or my entire approach to cybersecurity is fundamentally flawed. So I think people are absolutely going to be, right now they're scratching their heads because there's not that many alternatives. That's your best option, is to use what is state of the art today. And what is state of the art has been invited to the room and been told, guys, we've found like 10,000 vulnerabilities across the board here, and Mythos connected this one with this one to potentially bring down the entire gas supply to the Eastern Seaboard or whatever it might be. I think that that's the wake up call now, and I think people are absolutely, including those companies and that technology that we do rely on. I think we're going to continue to need to rely on them, but they're going to have to find ways to make themselves reliable, which they're not today.
Got it. Give me a hot take on quantum computing. I seen there was a paper came out between Google and Ethereum, and I think they suggested that quantum computing looked like more of a possibility by like 2029 or something like that, where
Mm-hmm.
people had previously thought this was kind of like 15, 20 years away. What does that mean? What does it mean from a security perspective? How do you think about it from Tide? So maybe give a couple of examples, like what could that mean in for the average person, if anything? What does it mean from a security perspective? Yeah, and just generally how you're thinking about that.
So quantum as a technology is again one of those things that can do incredible things for humanity, solve diseases in compelling ways, predict the weather better, all kinds of stuff. From a security perspective, the risk is not just like with AI where it can do things smarter and faster, but that it can solve mathematical problems that traditional computing couldn't. So the strength of a cryptographic key, which is effectively just a giant random number, the ability for a quantum computer to guess it, to be able to use it and break today's encryption, or not all of today's encryption, but some of it. That's the theoretical risk, where if quantum computers can reach that kind of breakout capacity, it means that a lot of the cryptographic protocols that we rely on today for the internet to be secure, like SSL, like, just things that we use today, we don't really understand them. They just kind of sit there. A lot of those become instantly defunct. And if that happens, or has already happened somewhere in a basement with some state actor, then the internet is completely open. So that's the threat. There's a big move and a big push towards switching those algorithms over. It's not a straightforward proposition. It's not, okay, well, we'll just swap the keys out, and because there's a big difference in the way that these algorithms work, but the performance that you get from different models. So you might be waiting longer for something to happen with a post-quantum resilient algorithm where even a quantum computer can't break this mathematics. So the world is going to be going through effectively like this massive open heart surgery. And the opportunity that presents to us is, even once you've swapped all these keys around to post-quantum keys that aren't susceptible to the power of this quantum computer, you're back to square one, where we're still doing cybersecurity in exactly the same way, and we're just using different keys. But you still have the problem of who has access to the key, who's trusted with the key, still trusting the vendor who holds the key. So you're back to square one after spending an absolute fortune in re-engineering the entire digital world so that it can continue to be, private or secure through the internet. So the opportunity for us as this technology, that its purpose is not to tell you which key to use. Its purpose is to make sure that no one ever has direct access to the key, that a key can only be used for what it's been designed for, in the way that it's been designed, in the context or by who it's should have access to it, and nobody else. So today, for example, our cybersecurity fabric that people uses standard keys that plug into the existing environment. Our ability to change that key presentation and use post-quantum algorithms is already, we've already made massive progress in our product roadmap. So we'll be just effectively just changing that key layer, but solving the bigger problem of making sure that the key can't be compromised, that you're not having to blindly trust that authority to make that trade, to prove that this is you to anything. So I think that open heart surgery will have to happen, and it may be sooner than we expected.
That's another thing to think about. It seems like, the one through line throughout this conversation just strikes me that there's just going to be a hell of a lot of change, uncertainty over the next couple of years. There's things just going to be kind of like ripped up and changed, but within timescales that are just completely compressed. We are going to outsource things more and more to technology. It sounds like having good guys in the fight, like you guys, like Tide Foundation, ensuring kind of like trust can be established in platforms. It's heartening to hear that, you know, that there are the good actors in there. But yeah, I mean, what would be your final words in wrapping up this conversation that you'd want to share with people?
I think our generation is in a very unique position in that we've seen what the world looked like before. We remember what it was like before mobile phones. Yet we are digital native enough to be comfortable, and we're developing the technology and building the technology companies that are the world of the future. I think we're in a very unique position that our kids aren't in, to understand what life was like before and what was great about it, and to make sure that that is not lost in this new world.
Yeah. Yeah, I was speaking to my wife this morning. She was like, you know, in Byron Bay, and she's like, don't forget the world is beautiful, like as it is, and nature is beautiful. And yeah, hopefully there's more coming back to that. I mean, you know, you look at the world today and there's a lot of this, looking at the phones and interacting, like people are disconnected. So maybe there's going to be a beauty in removing some of that. We come back to just remembering this innate utopia we're actually in. Mike, always a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy man. Great to see you in person. I know you are a real person. Yeah,
Yep.
confirm that. And we'll speak again soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Cheers, buddy.